Oh my God, ladies and gentlemen, I'm so excited to cover this story. Dude, the ending of this story is crazy. It's next level. And oh my God, let's calm down, y'all. Let's calm down. Let's cover this story. Okay, so check this out. So what this does is this opens up on just like an alternate Earth. And Superman on this alternate Earth is getting absolutely pummeled. Now there's this like disembodied voice that comes out of nowhere, right? And it says, "Can you still hear me, Kal? Or has that ability faded too?" And the response to the Superman is, "I can hear you." And this person says, "Good, then know that I'm coming. Do you want to run away?" And the response of Superman is, "I'm not running." And the other person says, "Of course not. They never run." Only for us to find out it's Ultraman, son! Now here's the thing, that's not even the big reveal. That's not even the big reveal, but Ultraman, son. Let me tell you something about Ultraman, right? Okay, look, here's the thing, y'all are gonna love this. So Ultraman comes from a place called Earth 3, and he basically leads what's called the Crime Syndicate of America. So, you know how like every universe in the DC Multiverse has a Justice League, right? Like, they fight for good and, you know, all that kind of cool stuff. The Crime Syndicate, those guys are dicks, but they're amazing. So the Crime Syndicate is basically an evil Justice League, and Earth 3 is a reality where everything's inverted. All the traditional good guys are bad guys, and all the traditional bad guys are good guys. It's one of the coolest universes out there in DC Comics. Ultraman is the Superman of Earth 3, who's basically a villain. And what he's been doing is traveling around the multiverse and killing off every Superman he can find in every universe. It's amazing because literally after pummeling this Superman, he's like, "Say it, Kal, say your last word." And like he literally says Lois, and literally Ultraman's like, "There it is. It's always the same." And he blasts him with his heat vision and he's like, "Now burn." Dude, it's the most dope ever, son. Dude, I saw that. I was like, son. Man, it's absolutely amazing, right? So literally he's like done, on to the next, and then just leaves. So what this does is it switches over to Jonathan Kent, the son of Superman. Now here's the thing, man. I gotta tell y'all, I have been missing out, son. This story is like the best thing coming out of Dawn of DC right now. Dude, it is amazing, right? So like, Jonathan Kent is kind of doing his thing and just sort of continuing on, right? Like hanging out with his boyfriend and so on and so forth. Folks got all pissed off when it turned out that Jonathan Kent had a boyfriend. Like, bro, he's a fictional character with powers of a god. That's the thing you choose to get mad about? Like, it's just one of the weirdest things. But what ends up happening is like all these satellites just seemingly start crashing to the ground out of nowhere, like just falling out of the sky. Now, the crazy thing here is that Superman, Supergirl, all those traditional Superman characters, they're all off-world. They're off doing their own thing, whatever it happens to be. So Jonathan Kent is like the only Superman-type character who's here. Now, he does the traditional superhero thing where like he travels around grabbing all these different satellites and trying to keep them from crashing into Earth. It's cool to see. But the other cool thing here is he actually reaches out to Oracle Barbara Gordon, which is not something that you normally see. Usually Barbara Gordon deals almost exclusively with the Bat family, but because of the fact that it is all kind of a shared community and so on, it is awesome to see that little bit of a reference here. So of course, Barbara is able to feed him information that allows him to achieve his goal of basically stopping all these satellites from like crashing into cities and so on and so forth. But what she also says here is that there's somebody else out there who's moving around and they're destroying all these different satellites, and it looks like Jonathan Kent and that person are on a collision course. Now here's the other cool thing that happens too, right? In this moment when Jonathan Kent is traveling around and trying to stop these satellites, he gets like this momentary experience where this kind of like inner power sort of surges up. Now it's not the first time this has happened, but it's never been explained. And even now, we still don't know what this means. We don't know if it's like a whole new level of power. We don't know if he's gonna transcend the traditional Superman and go back to like the 1990s after Superman died and came back and becomes like the Man of Energy and that terrible ass series of stories that DC was writing back in the day. Whatever the case happens to be, we don't exactly know what's gonna happen here. But what we do know is that when he finally makes his way to the other person that's traveling around and stopping all these satellites, we end up finding out it's Val-Zod. Dude, Val-Zod is amazing. Okay, look, here's the thing. Here's a cool thing, right? Val-Zod is the leader of the Multiversal Justice League. So for those of you guys who don't know what that is, the way this works is that you have what's called the House of Heroes. So where you do have a Justice League on every single Earth, the House of Heroes is where the Multiversal Justice League operates out of. They also have Captain Carrot. Oh, Captain Carrot. I love Captain Carrot. Captain Carrot's a super bunny. I love Captain Carrot. He's like one of the coolest characters ever. He's like a rabbit Superman, but you have like all these different like superheroes that operate out of this place. It's one of the coolest things ever. But Val-Zod is one of the most amazing versions of Superman, because when he basically saves everything, he introduces himself to Jonathan, because Jonathan has never really met Val-Zod before. And it's one of the easy things to miss, given the nature of the DC multiverse and the superheroes and so on and so forth. It's easy to forget that Jonathan doesn't really know anything about the House of Heroes. But it's kind of cool, because what ends up happening is Val-Zod actually ends up grabbing Jonathan and then taking him to meet Mr. Terrific. Now, Mr. Terrific, for those of you guys who aren't familiar, is probably one of the most intelligent people in the entirety of the DC universe, right? The guy's got like a genius level intellect, but he's also worked alongside Val-Zod in the DC Comics landscape. And so that's the reason why Val-Zod considers him to be a friend, and it's why Jonathan is brought to Val-Zod, as well as them grabbing Lois Lane. Now, the reason why this happens is because what Val-Zod and really like this Red Tornado do is they basically talk to Lois and Jonathan about how Ultraman is traveling around the multiverse and killing different Supermen. Now, the funny thing about this is Jonathan knows who Ultraman is, and this goes back to Brian Michael Bendis' run on the Superman comics with the Unity Saga, which was like one of the only good things that Bendis wrote. But the thing about this is that Jonathan was at one point kidnapped by Ultraman and then in turn held in a volcano. Now, the idea behind Ultraman doing this with Jonathan, and it was really more Jonathan just kind of landing in Earth 3, right? Just kind of like literally passing through a black hole and ending up in that reality. But Ultraman wanted to take Jonathan Kent as his own kind of protege. And the reason why is one of the main differences between Jonathan and even the main DC Universe Superman, as opposed to Ultraman, is that Ultraman believes that strength is the only thing that matters. Now, a lot of that goes back to the time that he was raised by the Kents in Earth 3, who were basically exploiting him, and then when in turn they revealed his origin, that he came from a spaceship, he realized they were simply just using him, and then he left, right? He literally turned on his own parents and then took off from Smallville, and then just basically became a warlord on Earth. But the thing about this is, because Jonathan is familiar with Ultraman, he's also aware of how capable Ultraman is. Now, the other part of this is that Red Tornado and Val-Zod then have to deal with what is quite possibly one of the most dangerous forces in the entirety of the multiverse, which is a concerned mom. I mean, let's be honest, guys, right? Like, Ultraman, sure, right? Like, the presence, Lucifer Morningstar, okay, but they have nothing on like a worried mom, because she will burn reality. A worried and concerned mom, right? Like an upset mama bear will destroy all creation for the sake of her child. That's just the way it works. And Lois Lane in particular is the one they have to contend with. And a lot of this is because Lois does not want to see her son go off into the multiverse and potentially face off against a being that could kill him. But what Red Tornado does is she reveals a couple different things. The first is she says that they would not be asking Jonathan if there was any other possible way. But what they've learned here is that Ultraman has some kind of device at his disposal that has the ability to weaken any version of Kal-El across the multiverse. Now, the kicker to this is that the device seems to be restricted only to people who are Kal-El and not anybody else. And so that's why they've asked Jonathan, because Jonathan and Val-Zod are kind of the exceptions, because yes, they are Superman, but they're not different versions, they're not variants of Clark Kent Kal-El. And so because of that, they're the ones that really have to respond to this. But what Red Tornado also reveals is that the Superman, the Clark of her Earth, was also destroyed. And that's when she reveals she's an alternate reality version of Lois Lane. And so it's a really cool revelation here, because what it means is that it's not the House of Heroes just asking this question indiscriminately with no real skin in the game outside of just seeing that like some alternate reality versions of Superman are being destroyed, and that's basically it. But it's actually a version of Lois who lost her own version of Superman, so she understands the true risks that are going on here. Now, the other big concern, and the reason why it's really more than just Superman being killed that's the issue, is that what the House of Heroes has also learned is that whenever Ultraman shows up to an alternate Earth, he kills that version of Superman and then leaves. Because there is no Superman on that world, it's only a matter of time before that world falls to any number of threats that exist out there. Because Superman is such a significant player within the realm of DC Comics that he is, in a lot of ways, the first line of defense and the thing that holds a lot of villains back from initiating these worldwide schemes to destroy Earth, whether they're from Earth or not, just because of the power Superman has. Now, this is a great reference to a story in DC Comics called The Nail, which is actually a result of what happens when there is no Superman on Earth and how things transpire. But the other part of this, and really kind of switching over to the point when Jonathan Kent leaves, this comes by way of Red Tornado being able to quite literally look into the multiverse and see when it is that Ultraman jumps. The downside to this is the only time they can see when Ultraman jumps is after he's killed a Superman, but they seemingly are able to pick up on where it is he's going next. And so the result of this is that when they find out where he's traveled to, they end up immediately taking off. Now, when they arrive to this Earth, it's one of the coolest moments. When they arrive here, Red Tornado seeks out Ultraman. She's able to find him, but just a moment before, he flies right through her and basically rips her in half. And then after that, like, he just attacks Jonathan, who's standing there with a Phantom Zone projector, right? Like a device that can basically send Ultraman into limbo, right? The Phantom Zone, kind of a extra-dimensional prison that people are normally not able to escape from. But when Jonathan Kent's taken out, Ultraman realizes it's the Phantom Zone projector. He picks it up, and then he literally pulls in Val-Zod and Red Tornado, and so now it's just Jonathan and Ultraman. Now, it's one of the cool moments, because in a lot of ways, it's kind of a return to things. Now, that's what's so interesting about this, right? Because there was a point in this story when Jonathan asked Val-Zod, why am I the only Jonathan that you're reaching out to? Isn't there any other version of me that you can grab? And the response of Val-Zod is, no, you are unique in the multiverse, because every version of Jonathan Kent is the age that you're supposed to be. Now, the reason why this is being stated is because of the fact that, remember, during Brian Michael Bendis' run on Superman, one of the things that had happened is that Jonathan Kent had been taken from Superman and Lois, and then over time had basically just been aged up. So he's older than he's actually supposed to be. The only exception to this is the statement that Val-Zod makes, which is really, really cool, where he talks about how there is another reality where there is an older version of Jonathan Kent, but that universe is overrun with the undead, i.e., Deceased, which is an awesome reference in the story. I love that they reference the events of Deceased. Ironically enough, Tom Taylor's writing both of these, so of course he references his own work. And so with Val-Zod and those guys being sucked into the Phantom Zone, what ends up happening is Jonathan Kent blasts Ultraman with his heat vision as powerful as he possibly can, which is enough to like singe him and destroy the Phantom Zone projector. And then in turn, Ultraman goes back on the offense and then attacks Jonathan Kent. Now, the funny thing about this is that he literally tells Jonathan, you're still holding back. You're still not using your full power. You've learned nothing in the time that we spent together when I was trying to make you my protege. Now again, despite the fact that Ultraman was trying to get Jonathan to cast aside the idea of compassion and caring, considering those weaknesses, there were valuable lessons to be learned there in the sense that Jonathan truly was holding back, that he never really seems to have come to the same realization his father did, that there are times when you can cut loose. Fighting Ultraman is one of those, but Jonathan has another one of these moments where this kind of mysterious internal power suddenly flares up. And when that happens, this guy cold cocks Ultraman in the head and beats on him like a side of beef. Dude, man, he beats his ass and like basically like pummels this guy into the ground and then just reverts back to his normal form, right? Like, it's cool. It's one of the coolest things. Not only that, we do get what is quite possibly one of the most amazing costume changes in the history of DC Comics, because Jonathan Kent in this all-blue Superman suit looks dope. Like, it looks pretty amazing. I mean, come on, guys. Post in the comments and tell me how dope this is. It looks awesome. But with basically Jonathan Kent kind of succumbing to the sheer amount of power that he had to sort of expend here, right, almost passing out from it all, that what ends up happening is Ultraman immediately attacks him and starts choking him out. And he says, okay, like, here's the thing, right? You want to play big boys? You want to play with the big boys? Then we can play, right? We can do this dance. I'm taking you back to my world. I'm dropping you back in that volcano where you're basically removed from the influence of the yellow sun, and then I will teach you to become me. I will teach you how to fight. I will force you to fight, and I will make you better than what you are. And he says, I'm not going to kill you, John. He says, but I am certainly taking this personally. I usually don't bother with the lowest lanes, but I'll make an exception on your world, man. Man, what's coming is crazy. Anybody who's read this story, man, I know it's gonna be crazy. Son, right? He says, I will make your lowest suffer. And then this voice out of nowhere says, no, you won't. It turns out They're on the Injustice Earth, son! And Injustice Superman breaks the neck of Ultraman on the spot! Dude, man, let me tell you something. It's Injustice Superman's son, Ultraman, had no idea who he was messing with, man. Because Injustice Superman, dude, this guy's so overpowered. It's not even funny, son. So, like, literally, like, when this happens, Injustice Superman sees, like, Jonathan Kent sitting there, and he's like, are you okay? And Jonathan's like, you killed him. And the response of Injustice Superman is, you have your mother's eyes. Why does that matter? Check the comment that's pinned on this video to watch the Injustice playlist and to see why that matters. Because, man, that story tells you what happens when the Joker kills Lois Lane. With that being said, guys, we're gonna bring this video to an end. Thank you all for watching, and I will catch you all later. Peace.